Jesus mark.
When I went through this gospel yesterday, as well as the first reading, my mind just went to try to imagine and to try to see what used to happen in the beginning, and especially this law that has been handed on to us. Let me take a perfect example: the scriptures. How these scriptures were written at the time when they were not typewriters, there were no computers. These people wrote this just by hand, and they rolled them in scrolls and they kept them. Thousands of, many years. I don't mean thousands. I don't know if it's thousands of years, but it would have taken a very long time and faithfulness and commitments to this cause. But they did that faithfully, and they handed that down. The prophets as well, the psalmist, all those people, they took a lot of time to write this down. And they handed it down to the generations. And I just imagine now we have all these things written. It's ready just to be read. I just realized how lazy we can become, not even reading that which was taken, which people took a long time to write that together, the commitment they took to write that together. That came to my mind when I went through this, and it's in line with what we just read in the first reading in the gospel, because now Moses, we know the book of Deuteronomy, Moses is talking to the people just before he retires and dies, and the people are about to step into the promised land. And remember, he's talking to a generation that is completely new, because most of those who were in Egypt died in the wilderness. They were not able to reach the promised land. Most of them died. If some survived, they would have been very, very few. So there are few of them who witnessed the crossing of the Red Sea. There are few of them who witnessed when Moses brought down the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. But at this time, Moses is talking to these people as if they had witnessed all of this. And he told them, never forget what you witnessed. Never forget what you were told. Never forget the presence of the Lord in your life. Always have that and hand it down to the generations to follow. Because remember, what Moses is doing is also handed that down, that information down to that generation. Their parents handed that story down to this generation. And we have that story down today because it was written. Somebody took the time to write it so that we in this generation will be able to understand that. And Jesus comes in the gospel and he says as well that I'm not going to change anything from the law. No letter will be taken out from it. And he says at the end, whoever obeys and teaches these commandments will be called greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So those who hand that down, what we do, hand it down, that authority and that commandment and that law and that story and that witnessing of Jesus Christ, of the God who loves us so much, to the next generation will be called greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And I say that this is a very difficult thing to do, because when I try to think about it, whenever we talk, whenever we have a conversation, do we really talk about these great things that God did for us? Think about the last time that you had a conversation and you were talking about Jesus. The last time that you were sitting and talking with friends and all you were talking about was the prophets, or talking about the journey of the Israelites through the desert or through the wilderness, or talking about what God has done in your life. No, we either talk about football, we either talk about basketball, or we are talking about some kind of sports, or talking about politics, and talking about other things that might not be it's not really beneficial to us indirectly. And the real danger is for our children, because they do not hear us talking about the mighty works of God. They do not hear us talking about Jesus. They do not hear us talking about our beloved Blessed Mother. They do not hear us talking about the mighty things that God has done in our lives. We do not even hand down this story to them. What do you give your children on their birthday? Do you give them the scriptures? Do you give them the rosary? I remember my first rosary that I received on my first Holy Communion. I still remember that perfectly because I thought that was a perfect. I never had a rosary. I had a rosary, the first one when I was in class 3. It was this luminous, this really plastic rosaries I was given as a gift by our teacher. And I was very happy with that. And the second one I got was on my first Holy Communion, and how much I appreciated that. Do our children even appreciate the rosary if you give them today? No? So whatever, most of the time we hand over maybe mobile phones to our kids, we hand over PlayStations to our kids, or online games to our kids, or there are these sets for games now that are very expensive, PS, they call it PS, or what is the other one called? Boy, all these things. But these are the things that we are really handed down to our kids, and nothing about the witnessing, nothing about the commandments, nothing about the sacraments, nothing about confession. You need to go for confession every month. You need to receive Holy Communion, and this is how you should receive Holy Communion. Most of those things, we are losing them. And this is really one of the commandments that Moses, one of the laws that Moses gave to his people just before they crossed the Red Sea. Please hand this down to your children and to your children's children. My dear brothers and sisters, maybe in one way or another, it is not late yet to begin to talk to our children about the love of God, to begin to talk to them about Jesus who came to set us free, to begin to tell them about what the stations of the cross means, to tell them about the crucifixion of Jesus, what it really means, to tell them about the resurrection of Jesus. And I think the early Christians, they told no stories about except the story about Jesus. Think about the two disciples on the way to Emmaus. Along that journey, they were talking about Jesus, talked about him throughout. And this was how the early Christians behaved. Everything about them was centered on Jesus. But that then, unfortunately, we live in a generation where the secularism is beginning to take the upper hand. And what we talk about now is what is latest on Google, what is latest on the news. And my dear brothers and sisters, it's a time to remind ourselves again, especially as we go through Lent, about our obligations as Christians to carry on this light of the gospel to our children, to our children's children, and to the generations to come after us.
Kiss us, mother, kiss your children. Bring God's blessings from above. With your mantle blue enfold us in your gentle holy love. See the darkness dissipating,